So our next panel is going to be hosted and moderated by Wes Choy, currently of Netflix. And definitely quite an interesting topic, really around the concept of, using IP transport and really AV over IP. These are people who are really implementing this every day, so there's going to be a lot to learn and a lot interesting to hear their experience. So Wes, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Thanks for that introduction, Dave. My name is Wes Choy. I'm the Global AV Builds Manager at Netflix, where we manage lots of corporate infrastructure for collaboration. So I'd like to thank ASG and B&H for being title sponsors and inviting me back to the stage to host this esteemed panel. So if we kind of think about where the superheroes last left off with AV over IP, it was probably, does anyone remember, like, 10 years ago, like Video Standards Forum, like 2014, reading technical recommendation 04. Anyone? No? Pretty yes. Okay, so this is like, we're 10 years out. But so really what I want to try to tackle today is kind of where the state of the industry is. We've got lots of movement with different types of encoders, decoders, new entrants into the market in terms of hardware, moderately priced hardware, kind of like that lets people have that easy on-ramp into AV over IP. So I've got these three awesome engineers on stage with me. Michael, Patrick, and Jason. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I really look forward to our chat. I'll start with Michael.
All right, I'm Michael Arlen. I am the executive production engineer at Meta, where I oversee kind of our more complex broadcasts, tentpole events like Connect, and kind of anytime you see Mark Zuckerberg live. That runs through our infrastructure, and we have a myriad of everything from baseband to getting into some of the AV over IP things, and so excited to sort of dive in and share what's worked for us and some of the things where we've avoided it.
Hey, my name is Patrick Gilligan, Principal AV Infrastructure Engineer at Zillow. I kind of manage our conferencing stack. Spend most of my time these days writing custom tooling and software. I think maybe what separates us is that we program in-house, so the control and observability, et cetera, that kind of sits over our AV hardware is kind of our own tech stack and therefore tech debt. And so yeah, we write a lot of tools to solve business problems for the most part.
How's it going? Jason Lipton, work for Visa, an AV architect, and work in the IT department and work with a great team. And we take care of everything from meeting rooms, small and large meeting rooms, all the way up to event centers. Also, too, within kind of our group is the networking, teams, environment, and all that. So, work with, many different people in many different facets.
Awesome. So you've got an amazing panel here. We're going to start off with a question just to address really the wide diversity of participants out there in the audience, where we could have people that are kind of single operator, sole proprietor, video production, all the way out to the representation of some of these large enterprise deployments. So I think I'll ask the question in kind of two parts. So, where do you think a lot of the challenges are lying with maybe just like a basic type of AV over IP transport? And then if you want to take a look at some examples and look at the kind of like what are the challenges for further scaling out from there. So I'm actually going to throw it to Michael first. It's so weird because I know this guy as Marlon for 5 years. It's a long story, but I'm going to call him Marlon, so I do know his name. So his name's Michael. So Mike, why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, totally. Okay, thinking small proprietors, small operator venues. I think the hardest part to diving into AV over IP is you need a network switch stack. You're going to need understanding of how to program those switches. You need a team of smart people behind you to work with you on that. And if you're going at it alone, it is a really steep mountain to climb. Even when you have all of those people, sometimes your in-house IT teams are working against you on it. And that's also a mountain to climb. I think my advice on that would be to start small. I mean, Panasonic has NDI licenses on their cameras, right? That's awesome. Pull that into something local. You can run vMix on a laptop if you want and be your own Mixer have this self kit that you could go out and run some really incredible events. And honestly, just start reading, because there's so much out there to absorb between all of the alphabet soup of standards out there that we have.
One thing I say about doing infrastructure in enterprise is it sometimes makes easy things hard. So getting a Mac Mini and downloading an application and sharing the password among several users at a given time is a lot harder at the enterprise level than it would be at home, because you have security standards, protocols. One team gets the password, one team handles with the network portion, one team handles with DHCP, DNS, so on and so forth. Another aspect is you could be a really skilled network engineer, have gone through CCNA and taken it as far as it goes, and not really understand how multicast traffic packets work on a network switch. It gets exponentially harder once you leave the layer 2, the VLAN, and once you leave the switch. Two separate problems that involve two separate solutions that overlap with each other. So that's why I think people still like the one cable. The camera goes here to the switcher. They run the cable, but unlike the network packet, it's pretty easy to figure out what's going wrong when something's going wrong.
Yeah, and just for me, in my experience, I always just kind of found that no matter the size of the system, as long as you stick to your foundations. Also, just to realize is when you're designing a system, you're not doing it yourself. So if you don't know something, don't be afraid. You can go ask somebody else that can help you out. I'm going to piggyback off of one of my colleagues here who held a cybersecurity presentation today. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we don't focus on with AV over IP is cybersecurity. And so that's something that I would like to see happen more, because that's one of the biggest challenges is you buy a piece of equipment, and now that cybersecurity knows about our equipment, they're going, well, we want to do a pen test. We want to make sure that it can go on our corp network. And a lot of times AV vendors aren't quite meeting that criteria. So that's probably the biggest challenge. And then just the other thing, right, isn't necessarily rocket science that, it's not necessarily the technology that are the challenges, right? Is, there's a lot of smart people in this room who have probably gone through the same thing. And that is when you're doing these installations, a lot of things that are overlooked are rack space, air conditioning, right? And those types of things that add on extra costs that make implementing AV over IP very difficult.
So the one thing that I kind of feel is a common theme right now is that there are multiple people, there's multiple parties. So what type of, we kind of name say network security generally, but what other partnerships are needed, that stack on top of the technology that are needed to make this type of deployment successful at scale?
I guess just overall soft skills in general, right? I mean, I think one of the hardest parts, speaking personally, is I was a technologist first, right? So I approach the problem, I see the solution, I want to implement it. And I think originally when you start out with that approach, you're like, cool, all of NetSec is in my way, how do I get around that? And that is the absolute wrong approach. It's figuring out how you can bridge that gap, as somebody once told me, build that social equity with those people to help them understand what you're trying to accomplish and really build those partnerships. So it might be your head of facilities for air conditioning. Can you call them at 2 in the morning and say, yeah, there's a water leak and that's going to be a problem? What are your escalation paths for that? It's everyone from the people getting the circuits in your building. Are you going to be able to get a dedicated outward-facing IP address to have an SRT inbound feed? Can you even do that in your environment? So it's not only knowing the right questions, but then really bringing in other people humbly to help you.
Yeah, I mean, even just within IT, that means so many things. We have a team that handles DHCP and DNS, how things NAT out to the internet and so on and so forth. We have a team that manages our network infrastructure, programs the switches, deals with AWS and the VPN and all the traffic, firewalls. Then we have another team that deals with all of the computers. And within that, there's a Windows team and a Mac team. So IT carries a lot of specific things that you need a partnership with all those. To build a Zoom room, you need partnership from all those. Doesn't count the real estate team who puts power or a network jack where there wasn't one before. And then when the other team realizes we're going to close this floor and open this new office, then we do it all over again. So we kind of stay agile. We're, jack of all trades a little bit, but hopefully without the master of none, where we know a little bit enough, but what was the term you used? Social equity.
Social equity.
I really
Great
like
meta
that.
term.
Yeah, that's really valuable. They have to trust you, so your requests are meaningful and actionable.
Yeah, and through where I'm working now at Visa, before in my past experience, I worked at a lot of great companies, and it was more about the technology side. Kind of where I'm at Visa, it's our most important part is the end user, is the person that you're designing the system for, and the corporate vision that you're trying to make this system enhance. So that's kind of my big approach is that's who I want to make sure that I partner with and understand. And then to enable that to happen, that's where you're partnering with the network team. That's where you're partnering with the cybersecurity team. That's where you're partnering with real estate and development to really be able to reach that pinnacle, and that is fulfill the end user's needs.
Yeah, that's really awesome, and I think that there's also kind of going along that you're always looking at the challenges of like say baseband versus going IP, and Patrick, I think you mentioned like, oh, it's not just like the cable, like it's okay, we're sending packets now, right? So what I've interpreted over the last say 10 years of like a standard being proposed and then ratified and then being brought into use with actual hardware is that there's actually still this huge stigma, there's still like this huge learning curve that exists for people that want to get into some of these types of systems designs. So I guess when we're trying to push the industry forward, it's like what do we want to see from the industry to allow that to happen? Is it like I said, moderately priced hardware? Is it the ease of setup? Is it orchestration? Are we pushing more on standards? So I guess so I'll start with Patrick. It's like what do you want to see out of the industry? Where should we help push this discussion?
A couple different things. I think most relevant to this topic is going back to that kind of knowledge cliff with AV over IP. If you ever use a program like Wireshark, it's kind of hard to use. It's hard to see what's going on. There's all these packets moving. There needs to be more kind of user-friendly tooling in that sense. Cisco, Netgear, Juniper, Netgear is kind of pioneered an AV line with a more UI-friendly, more soft tools that make things sensible to people. So if you spend all your time being a video engineer, you don't need to start a new career as a network engineer. And then for my kind of personal thing is that a lot of these AV companies are not very API first. It's almost the opposite of what I just said. They spend too much time on their bespoke front end when they really need to be giving out that data organized and programmatically. So the companies and the programming outfits that sit in the middle can kind of take it and sell a new product. That's kind of how IT and software engineering work, and AV is generally 5 years, 10 years behind in that. So I'm always happy whenever I see gains in that space.
That's awesome. Jason.
Yeah, to address the stigma, when you're going to design a system, you have to believe in it and you have to be able to sell it, and you have to have a good reason of why you're implementing the system that you're implementing. Because if you can't, convince somebody of why you're investing in this latest greatest technology compared to something that is easy as something as plugging in your computer and then just outputting it to this projector, for instance. If you can't convince somebody of that, then you're never going to get their buy-in. And so when you don't get their buy-in, that's when it scares a lot of people off. And so that's kind of my approach there, is to really believe in what I'm doing and to just make sure that people understand what I'm doing when I'm designing a system. And then as far as like what would I like to see, I'm going to, again, kind of just go back to the cybersecurity, because that is really the hardest pain point that we're dealing with. It's easy to buy the equipment. It's easy to connect the equipment, right? Is like you have, integrators, you have vendors who all work with you to get a system working. But if you can't even put that device on the network because it can't pass any security protocols, then it's no good.
I guess I take a slightly different approach to the answer to the question, though I completely agree, Patrick and Jason, with yours. Mine, I think, is on us to pick the right moment to deploy it. I think all too often we'll see a dozen rooms, some event spaces, some conference rooms, and go, cool, we're going to convert the whole thing to IP. And I think one of the challenges there, it's a great objective, but that often we bite off more than we can chew. And
I was just saying, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
yes, I think the way that we can advance the industry is by picking the right moment to deploy it, to have a project that needs to be decentralized, that has a control room in another state, that you have the 100 gig circuit between two buildings already, and that you could really make this technology sing. That you could only run one Cat6 cable somehow to a PTZ camera and you need NDI to work. That's the moment to use this technology, which then the rest of your company is going to see that. You can advance it forward because you have a success. But picking the new shiny technology and saying, it's awesome, we're a SMPTE 2110 venue, but you're a 400 square foot studio, does that necessarily actually help?
So I guess the follow-up question to all this is really about, looking at the ROI of it all, right? Because, okay, well, as a former metamate, right, I'd be like, someone would be asking, like, what is the ROI in all this, right? So it's like, have you all done your cost calculus in what the ROI is? Does it only make sense in terms of small deployments or maybe selected regions, or does it look something that's worth it to be deployed like at full scale, like globally for your physical footprints?
I mean, I think my last answer was I don't think it makes sense to deploy globally. I think you need to be selective in when you use it. I guess our AV over IP technology is amazing, and you get great logging out of it. You get great results when you have all of it deployed properly. You also get that out of SDI. You could get 12G SDI. It's going to work great for you. And I think it's just being selective.
Well, I would say, one of the biggest benefits, just from a user kind of perspective of AV over IP is the fact that it's a massive router. And when if you're, for example, right, it's like we just did a 13-floor build in our new building, right? And if we were going to try to use baseband and centralize those signals back to a main router or a main hub and then distribute from there, that'd be very difficult, because it just comes down to, it's a longer distance, and that signal can really handle. And then, just also from the other perspective too, it's like you get this, kind of anywhere, any place kind of routing from source to destination, and then it's a great way to, just manage HDCP and then manage your EDIDs as well. So, from a technical perspective, AV over IP makes a lot of sense as far as, our perspective, because it makes our lives a lot easier. From a user perspective, right, that's where the ROI becomes difficult, because, if you have a simple workflow, the user may not notice the difference, at the end of what it looks like or what it sounds like in room. So it's kind of hard to kind of calculate that ROI.
I think like the promise of AV over IP is kind of like you put the host on the network and you figure out what and where you want to do with it later. And that's, very promising, because similar to you plug someone's laptop in the office or on the Wi-Fi, and then they can figure out later if it's a software engineer or a salesperson or whatever. Once it's living there in that kind of standardized ecosystem, you can allocate it as needed. At our offices, we've actually sunset a a small bit of AV over IP when we realized the rooms don't actually need it. And we've gone back to HD-based T because we had issues with user training, user error, not enough technical staff to support it at a given time, and it was just more consistent. So that's why I go back to that phrase that resonates with me a lot that a friend of mine said, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. Like, I'm a technologist. I like to nerd out on the latest and greatest, but I like to have other people around me keeping me in check, saying, does it work 9 times out of 10, 9.9, 9.99, 9.999? That's the principle of high availability. And it has to go several decimal places over to make sense in terms of being justified to replace a previous technology.
I was going to say, to the way that Jason has deployed it at Visa, you have a building, you control it, it's your 13 floors. You have a central riser where you can run fiber up and down for those links that you need. That is the perfect place to deploy this.
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing. If you have a distributed campus, you don't necessarily own the hops between buildings. That gets trickier.
Yeah.
So I think that between the three of us, that does highlight like the perfect right case to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, but it's also to highlight, it's like it's not easy to get there. And that's why I was mentioning, that you got to have good relationships and you got to have a good solid plan in place and work with your integrators on, how many fiber strands do I need in my backbone? All these kind of little meticulous decisions and thinking about it beforehand is what's going to save you time in the long run when you're, trying to get the system up and running.
Yeah, so looking at, Patrick, you were talking about 99.99% reliability. Like, I think that, when I get called upon on my leadership to look at some of these systems, we're looking at, different types of observability, what that ROI is, how do we look at the data collection, the metrics, and how we manage these fleets, right? So, zooming out, it's like, what are you all excited in terms of how you manage like an entire large deployment ecosystem of a lot of AV over IP devices?
You have one.
Okay,
You're
yeah.
probably the largest deployment.
Yeah. So what's exciting about it is the ability to take any source to any destination, and that just really makes it easy. Especially, part of the return, the ROI is that when we have a CEO event, if we wanted to host the CEO event in the multifunction room on our 3rd floor, we could then route it at the push of a button to all the monitors on every floor, and then every multifunction room, right? And then, so that's where it just makes it very easy when you have it set up right. And now, we all know, right? Like, everybody in this room has been through challenges and implementing systems and all that. So we all know that it's not easy to get it to that single button push, but once you get it there, then it makes it, it just makes it easy to distribute signals and you get that message across for that CEO.
I think you're talking about how you monitor it, right? If it is all on the network, you have that visibility. You can see that traffic flowing. I get a little green light in a ROS router if my SDI is connected, but it's not telling me a ton of the data. It's not telling me necessarily the status of that picture. I have to route it to a monitor to see it. You can see all of that in an AV over IP network if it's set up right and if you have the right traps in place to pull that data. So I think it's a huge benefit if it's done right.
Yeah, I just think there's a whole lot of moving parts in AV events, whether it's events that are temporary where skilled operators come in and watch over them the whole time, or whether it's rooms that just sit there that anyone who doesn't know what they're doing can pick up and use it, and using the room is as easy as looking for a house on Zillow. I think for sure I probably have the simplest AV stack here, just judging by the conversations we've had. And I just think our strategy of deploying in-house, it's been the only way that we can make it happen, but it's still a whole ton of work to keep that afloat, keep it all monitored. There's so many different parts with kind of insufficient tooling, and so I think we just kind of, people like us just keep banging on this industry and the manufacturers and just push towards better tools and better observability and get there in time. It's a fun ride.
Yeah, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just to the monitoring. I mean, that's truthfully what I've been going around to a lot of vendors today and just asking about is the monitoring tools, because we're so focused on image quality, sound quality, right? And we're used to utilizing those monitors in our AV world, but there's really nothing to tell you kind of what's the quality of that packet across your network. And then there's a lot of, just finger pointing at the end of the day if you can't prove it.
That was going to be a quick follow-up question in terms of individual efforts on your observability platforms, and what type of resources do you have to try to put together dashboarding or data visualization in order to have that visibility into these systems? Are you working on any projects like this?
I think I actually have the least AV over IP deployment in my area because it's all baseband. Minus, a couple of NDI cameras, a couple of SRT and outs. But no, I think that's what we're really lacking. And you asked earlier what the industry needs. I think I said like us to deploy it, right? No, I think it's easier ability to just ad hoc setup monitoring to dive into it and get what we need. And so I think it's still a work in progress for us.
Jason?
Yeah, so I mean, like right now, we're kind of just using the basic tools that come with like NDI analyzer and stuff like that. And then we're really looking into just kind of how can we leverage network technologies to be able to monitor the system. But it's a challenging one because there's not one type of AV over IP just technology that you're supposed to monitor. You have Dante, you have NDI, you have 2110, you have proprietary protocols, right? That like Lightware, QSC, and all of them are implementing, and there's no one easy way to monitor it as a whole. What you end up doing is you end up utilizing Designer, or you utilize NDI analyzer, or you utilize just the different tools that come with the manufacturers right now.
We use a lot of tools. This is like a big part of my job, especially in the last 6 months. We use Splunk, Domotes, QSys Reflect, piloting other products like Excite. We just spend a lot of time. We kind of need a lot of different tools and put them all together to paint a picture. The way I see it is kind of a morning alert gives you the review, and then a real-time alert gives you things as they're happening. And then the third thing is the business intelligence. So when stakeholders want to figure out what's being used, how and when, we have that data as well.
So, in the last question I'm going to get into, you're talking about a lot of disparate platforms, a lot of different manufacturers, different APIs. This wouldn't be a panel discussion at this summit without some type of question around AI. So I'm going to throw that one out there is like, what are you looking for in terms of how AI could help you, glue these platforms together, help with the data aggregation, either the coding, some of the API pulls, like, what are you looking for in terms of that AI influence?
I could say I am not a coder, and anytime that I have needed to, I have reached out into Llama or into ChatGPT for some simple JavaScript for a ROS dashboard, or for how to combine two things together, right? You can MySpace that code that comes out into something that you want versus just writing it from scratch.
I see two kind of key layers for AI with AV. The first one is the one I use every day. It's just superpowers the code writing. It's like you're a team leader on a software team instead of a one guy trying to figure out how to code. Been super helpful, complete game changer. You still have to know how systems work to deploy it. And then the other one that's kind of exciting that I think you'll see a lot is computer vision. Ways to point and switch cameras and increase the efficacy of hybrid meetings using tools with software that lives over an image and decides how to interpret it and what to do with it.
Jason?
Yeah, in our current installment, we did incorporate some AI steer vision, and it's cool to see the automation aspect of it. But what I would kind of like to see more of with the AI is like, how do we use the AI not so much for image quality, but to gather other sorts of data, right? Like you have this camera that's utilizing that could be, utilize AI, and it could capture like counts in rooms. It could capture a lot of data, like who's in there from the company. Just so that's what I would like to see more of AI is like, how do you utilize it to incorporate more data, and also, for instance, if you're in a Teams environment, how do you utilize it so that you can utilize your Teams environment to control or monitor your AV over IP or AV environment?
Well, those are all super awesome responses. I really want to thank our esteemed panel for participating in this discussion. And once again, thank you to the summit, and thank you for participating and being a fabulous audience.